Nerd alert! Learning is important, right?
Yes, exactly. What a bunch of nerds.
Nerd alert!
Right.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob Demar, as a chief product architect of Misfits and Machines.
Hello, Elena.
Hello, we are back with your weekly Nerd Alert. Every week, I'll take a deep dive into academic marketing research and translate its complex ideas into simple, understandable language for Rob. And of course, for all of you, are you ready to nerd out, Rob?
I got my bucket, Elena. It's time to milk this nerd cow.
Okay. All right, let's get into it. As always, we'll link the research we cover in the episode notes. This week, I read a study titled The Power of Creative Advertising. Creative ads impair recall and attitudes towards other ads. And this is by Hyung Sung Jin, Gail Kerr, Jabram Su, Hyo Ye J. Kim, and Ben Sheehan all collaborated on this research. But before I get into things, Rob, let me ask you this. What do you think is the most creative advertisement that you've ever worked on?
Oh, geez. Well, back in my younger days, I did everything from have a girl pull her bloody teeth from her mouth to a young man wrapping himself in cellophane, singing "I'm a Little Teapot," and while he spanked his tush.
Oh my gosh.
But
And we hired you to run the creative team here.
Yeah, but I'll go with actually I think a campaign that the team did at Marketing Architects where we put adult heads on babies' bodies and had them do testimonials about how they, felt like they slept like a baby for a particular mattress company. I think it was just the right level of creativity and spoke to the benefit, and it was just slightly creepy, which was, made it fun.
I love that campaign. Did not run for long enough, but I think that would have been really successful. Yeah, that one was fun. Well, today we're going to talk about a study that doesn't have to do with the tremendous impact that ad had. We're actually going to talk about the impact the ads around it had. So let's talk about it. We all know that creative advertising is supposed to be a good thing. It grabs attention, increases engagement, and ideally it makes people remember your brand better. That's been backed by plenty of research that we've covered on this show. But what if I told you that creativity can actually hurt the other ads around it? This study explores something called the creativity-based impairment effect. It essentially means that when a creative ad is shown in a mix with regular ads, those regular ads take a serious hit. Not just in recall, but in overall perception. So the researchers tested this in multiple ways. They had groups of participants watch ad blocks, some filled with regular ads, others mixed with creative ads. They measured brand recall and attitudes towards the ads afterwards. They experimented with repetition. Some ads were shown multiple times, while others appeared just once. What they found was not what traditional ad thinking would probably predict, but first, pop quiz. Rob, if you're watching an ad break with one incredibly creative, award-winning ad and a few regular ones, what do you think happens to the regular ads? Do people remember them more, less, or the same?
You're kind of leading the witness here, I'll be honest with you, because my gut would have been, well, geez, they benefit from it. There's like a halo effect because people's brains are primed and they're like, this was funny. And then they go into the next ad and maybe they don't like it, but their brain was, ready for it. But I'm going to assume you're going to tell me I'm wrong.
I gave it away. I actually didn't mean to do that. I realized that as I was describing the study. Sorry. Okay, but that's interesting to know. Your instinct would have been the opposite.
It would have, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense why the study kind of tees up. It's not what traditional ad thinking might think. Yeah, so their first finding is that regular ads, they get crushed in a creative mix. So when those regular ads were shown alongside creative ones, their recall dropped by 30%. But it actually gets worse. When a creative ad was repeated in the mix, recall for the non-repeated regular ads plummeted by 70%. So that means that in a typical ad break, if your ad is surrounded by a few super creative award-winning spots, maybe not award-winning, but super creative spots, people are much less likely to remember your ad at all. It's like the creative ads are like hogging all that mental space in your customers' brains. But Rob, have you ever seen an ad that was so good, it made the next ad feel just completely lifeless? Like you go from watching some brilliant cinematic masterpiece to like an accident in an insurance spot or something. Like it's almost painful.
I think we've all had that, especially with high stakes events like the Super Bowl, where you're like just one great spot after the other, huge production value. And then all of a sudden you're like, how did this ad even get in here? Like,
You're
was
hit with
this
like
an
the local
accident?
feed.
Yeah, I was just going to say local feed. Like, how did, pizza joint get in there? I'm like, yeah, totally. You almost wonder if it's a trick. Like, you see some of those ads right after and you're like, I bet this is going to be a joke. Like, there's a joke in here somewhere. It's going to turn and you're like, nope, that was really the ad.
So those types of like regular ads that follow something great, they don't just get forgotten, they're actually liked less, which I could resonate with that personally. So not only are they harder to remember, but their perceived quality takes a hit. So in one test, the same set of regular ads was rated 10% lower in likability when they had appeared alongside creative ads. So this suggests that creative ads raise the bar in our minds, making regular ads seem even more boring by comparison. So essentially, people weren't just ignoring the regular ads, they were actually judging them more harshly.
Wow.
Yeah. And then finally, they had another finding called the Super Bowl effect, which is basically that repetition makes it worse. So they tested different repetition conditions. When regular ads were repeated, their recall still suffered if they were surrounded by creative ads. When creative ads were repeated, the recall of non repeated regular ads approached zero. So if you think about that in the context of something like the Super Bowl, that's a showcase for some of the most creative and expensive ads in the industry. But if you're running a plain average ad in that same mix, it might not just get ignored, it could actively suffer by comparison. So this study, it adds sort of a new twist to the long-standing debate about creative advertising. Yes, creativity is powerful, but not just for your brand. If you're in a competitive ad environment, creative ads can suppress recall and perception of other ads. So marketers, you got to really like go big or go home. If your ad isn't at least a little creative, it might be a waste of money if you end up in that creative heavy lineup. So maybe reconsider high profile ad placements. Spending big on a regular ad in a creativity driven event like the Super Bowl might backfire. But Rob, just because a brand, they might have a small creative budget, it doesn't mean they have to produce boring work. So what advice would you give marketers that they want to produce effective creative work, but they have a smaller sort of budget?
I mean, it just comes back to, do you have a really good idea? If you think about, we were talking about the Super Bowl earlier, and I know we've talked about them in the past, but when Coinbase ran their QR code spot, it was super arresting in that environment. And it was a simple QR code bouncing on a screen, and it had everybody talking. If you look at like the Dollar Shave Club, do you remember the classic Dollar Shave Club spot that launched the brand? That founder, it was a hilarious commercial, was incredibly well written, and it cost $4,500. So it just goes back to, do you have a great brand idea, a great story to tell, and just a compelling, well written way to do it?
Yeah, totally agree. It also made me think about if I'm planning my like TV buy or my media buy in general. Everyone's obsessed with CTV right now. And we like CTV. We buy it. It's great for a lot of
Definitely.
things. But like the traditional national linear feed, if you're ever watching that, the ads are different than CTV. Like I say CTV is generally like newer brands. Linear, you get a lot of those like DR, sometimes more boring ads. So this is making me
Right.
think, hey, another reason to invest in linear TV if you can go in with a very creative spot. And then a lot of brands, there are a lot of Super Bowl advertisers that just advertise in the Super Bowl. What a mistake. Take that creative
Such a
ad
mistake.
and put it on year round. You're going to have such a better effect. And you could even be, if like you're airing on networks where you have a lot of competition that airs too, even bigger reason to run a creative ad, because you could actually chip away at your competitors with something that's really creative. The Rob GPT is kind of long, but I really liked it. So buckle up.
All right.
If for some reason it made it super long. Let's think of this study like a Thanksgiving dinner, but for advertising. Imagine you're at a big family feast. You've got a solid plate of mashed potatoes, green beans, and turkey. It's a good meal, but nothing too flashy. Then suddenly your cousin walks in carrying a 5-tier chocolate fountain, complete with sparklers and a choir singing its arrival. What happens next? Well, everyone forgets about the turkey. The mashed potatoes might as well not exist. Even though they're still on the table, no one's talking about them and no one's going back for seconds. That's exactly what happens when a regular ad is sitting next to a highly creative one. The creative ad is a chocolate fountain with sparklers, stealing all the attention and leaving everyone else feeling forgettable. I mean, everything else feeling kind of forgettable.
The Rob GPT usually nails it, but nobody forgets about the turkey. Come on.
I'm not going to lie. Like, if I was truly like hungry for Thanksgiving, like you starve yourself all day, you don't want dessert first, right? Like you want the turkey.
You want the stuffing,
Right. I should have told
but
it
I
to.
get it. I get the point.
I should have yelled at it. Do you ever get just really mean to ChatGPT?
Well, I mean,
it gets one thing wrong, you're like, redo it. That was terrible.
AI hasn't ever actually bellied up to the Thanksgiving table, right? So It doesn't truly understand the value of the stuffing.
That's called the American advantage, folks, over AI. We know what that feels like. I'd also like to mention that the week that this podcast drops is a lightning strike week for us. So this week we're putting out a bunch of content on creative effectiveness. That's why we chose this episode as a theme. So we have a new white paper that everybody should go read. Go to our website and you can read it.
I'm going to go read it right now.
You should have already read it. Hopefully. I think you were part of the approval team, but
I did, but I can read it again.
Okay, perfect. That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Taylor De Los Reyes for producing the show. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you like the podcast, please leave us a review. Now go forth and build great marketing.
Marketing Architects.